Good morning, everybody. I'll bring this committee of the whole meeting to order. Thursday, January 27th at 9:02, and that acknowledge that we are in the traditional territory of Stahelis, and there's a little change in the order of the agenda.
Excuse me, Your Worship.
Yep.
Are there any late items?
Yeah.
No. Do you have a late item, sir?
Yeah, that's the move. No, sorry, no late items, no.
Thank you. Then go ahead, sir.
There'll be a slight change in the agenda. That item F, water filling stations, be moved to Thursday, January the 27th, immediately following item B, and that item G, BC Transit Bus Shelter Program, be moved to Thursday, January the 27th, to be the final item of that day, immediately following the water filling station report. Next order of business, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Then could we have approval of the agenda as amended then, please?
Moved by Councillor Piper, seconded by Councillor Vidal. Good morning, Councillor Palmer.
Good morning.
Call the question. All in favor? All in favor, nobody opposed? Thank you. Next order of business, please.
Yes, thank you. We'll move on to items for discussion this morning. We have the report from the financial officer. This is the presentation of the 2022-2026 draft financial plan.
Financial officer, it's all yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to share the screen for the presentation. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to start today taking a look at some of the changes to this year's budget, some highlights of changes for this year's budget. This year's budget will require $2,519,662 in municipal taxation. Business licensing will be an increase this year to the budget to $28,000. That reflects changes with the IMBL licensing. That's the intermunicipal business license. Sorry, it's moving on its own. Pay parking, we will be increasing the budget for the revenue side of this to $310,000 this year. The boat launch revenue will be increasing to $25,000 as we saw the last couple of years, an increase to the usage. And curbside collection revenue will be increasing due to a change in our current service provider contract and resulting change in rates. Sorry, Rhonda, how do you get it to stop moving? Sorry, we'll just adjust it so it stops moving on its own. I'm not going to talk that fast. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. And in grants, small communities grants will be shown at $330,000 revenue in this year's budget. And the Community Works Fund gas tax grant will be $122,500. If there are any questions as I go through these slides, Council has the opportunity to ask questions at that time or at the end of the presentation, depending on what they prefer. Please just let me know. In expenses this year, we will be the collective agreement with the QP Union Local 458 expired on December 2021, and that will be, we expect to go into negotiations this year to renew that contract. Professional services, under professional services category, we have the actuarial valuation of post-employment benefits at a cost of $5,100. Included is a building conditions assessment regarding PSAB 3280, a new requirement under PSAB in which our buildings have to be assessed to determine any liability at the time that they go out of service. That's estimated at a cost of $30,000. A DCC bylaw update is planned for this year at a cost of $20,000. It will be funded by DCCs. Collective bargaining consultants at an estimated cost of $20,000 have been added to the budget for the renegotiation of the collective agreement contract. A third-party exempt salary review was a carry-forward item for $10,000 from last year. And this year will be the election with an expected expense of around $18,000, which has been included in the budget. In addition, IT support services are expected to increase to an amount of $53,650. These were the types of things for the Maze accounting software, Zoom, Bang the Table, public consultation software, and general IT support. Under protective services, the fire department had an operating service surplus in 2021, which is estimated at $26,800. This amount will be transferred to their capital reserve for fire equipment purchases in 2022, when the balance of the fire truck purchase will be made. Emergency services included in this is an emergency alert system that has already come before council, and that is $3,000. Under the development side, municipal engineering will be in the budget at $35,000. The balance of the McCombs Bridge assessment, which is funded by gas tax, and the Hot Springs Road Drainage Project grant application, which will be DCC funded and is expected to require engineering services approximately $20,000. Under planning consultant, there's $85,000 for general planning services. The Parks Master Plan, which is a DCC funded project. Sorry, $20,000. The OCP review, which is gas tax funded, is also a carry forward project for $50,000. And the Urban Forest Master Plan, also gas tax funded, a carry forward project at $75,000 is in the budget, as well as the balance of the parking management plan, which is reserve funded. And flood mitigation planning, which is a grant funded project, which is underway at $150,000. Under community development, the Starlight Rink, unfortunately, was not able to open again in 2021 and the first quarter of 2022. The expenses won't be covered by the revenue anticipated, and that lost revenue will be covered by the COVID Restart Grant, which is estimated around $9,000 in 2022. Under public works, repairs and maintenance, there's funds of $30,000 in the budget to remove asbestos from the public works buildings. There is a reconciliation crosswalk project, which has been brought before council, proposed grant funded at $15,000. Curbside collection, the new contract in 2022 will be $133,929. In addition, the council's approved the addition of recycle bins for glass and mixed use recycling for $52,500. These are to be funded by surplus for this year and costs recovered from revenues from Recycle BC as that comes in. In addition, another area that saw increased costs is the animal waste supplies. That's for the dog collection bags. And that's mostly because of an increase in cost due to supply chain changes. The COVID-19 Restart Grant covers revenue loss and increased operating expenses due to the pandemic and is funded through the COVID-19 Restart Grant. For 2022, we have put in 149,300 in the budget for the following expenses and revenue coverage. Loss of revenue from Memorial Hall and special event rentals, skating rink revenue, increases in bylaw expenses, which have included bylaw enforcement costs and summer policing, increase in beachfront maintenance and safety, including garbage removal, supplies, washroom facilities, PPE, and OHS pandemic safety. In addition, the ongoing project of the website upgrade for communications is included in this. There are 2 proposed projects also for these funds. The hands-free water bottle filling stations will be coming forward in a separate report to council. And there's also a proposed HVAC system for Memorial Hall, an upgrade that would require some engineering design. And the operations manager can speak to that one if council has any questions with regards to that. A few more capital projects that carry forward from 2021, the floodgate safety upgrade. Stairs to the floodgate is going to be reserve and gas tax funded for a total of $30,000. Equipment of $36,000. Currently has a water bottle filling station funded by gas tax. Electronic stations, EV stations, also funded by gas tax, and Mobimats funded by reserve. Office equipment and furniture replacements this year, $35,000, will include the annual computer replacements and also the replacements of the server. All these will be reserve funded. The fire department building expansion is grant funded and is in the amount of $750,000. In addition, the fire truck, which is on order, has a balance to fund of $383,000 this year. It had a $302,000 down payment, and with up to $200,000 being approved from surplus by council to supplement the reserve funding of this truck. Under trails, the McCombs, there's a balance to complete, which is grant funded for the McCombs Miami River Trail, $161,700. There's a drainage project, the Hot Springs Road drainage project. There's been a grant submission, which has been approved by council, and that's $2 million, and some smaller drainage projects funding of around $85,000 are in the budget. There is 1 bus shelter added to the budget, gas tax funded, which is also BC Transit cost share and will cost $14,000. And the boat launch dock deck replacement is a carry forward project from 2021 being reserve funded and is $20,000. Does any member of council have any questions at this time? Or would you like me just to move on? Yes.
Ray, can you?
It says, I thought we agreed that it was going to be, it says drainage 2,085,000. And we've agreed that round about nearly 600,000 would be added to that from the DCCs, which would take us out. Is that not correct?
It will be partially funded by DCCs. The operations manager can speak to this project and its details.
Right, and
yeah, you are correct, Councillor. I believe it's 533,400, if I think, off the top of my head.
sorry, and did I see something on there about engineering for that, 20,000? I think it was the bit before.
That is correct.
That's correct. So that brings the total to that up to around about nearly 3 million.
No,
200.
the grant will actually be 2,020,000.
Yeah. And on we're on the boat launch, what's happening to the building there? Didn't we receive funding to increase the size of the building at the boat launch?
That is correct. And we went out for tender and the costs were over what we had budgeted. So this year we'll reassess the to see whether we're going to put out a new tender, see if we can get some more quotes.
Right. Thank you. That's all for the moment.
Under the Resort Municipality Initiative, the RMI funding, there's a beach redevelopment, the berm project. 200,000 will be funded through RMI and an $800,000 grant for $1 million for that project. The Lagoon Walkway at 894,000 will be funded to $225,000 from RMI and 669,000 from grant funding. And in tourism infrastructure and programming, 294,000 is in the budget as part of the resort development strategy. And this is for funding that goes to Tourism Harrison for events, some administrative costs, a rink fire pit, the boat launch building renovation, and fountain improvements. Any,
Yeah, on the beach redevelopment, we've got the Bream, we've got the Lagoon Walkway. Will they be done this year before we actually get onto the flood management, or will they be part of the flood management? Will they, I mean, what I don't want to see is we spend all that money and it gets washed away next April or this April.
I'm sorry, are you discussing the berm construction versus the dike construction?
Yeah.
So the consultant was out yesterday and I forwarded the project, all the details regarding the project yesterday, and they're going to look at how that will affect their ultimate design. So they do have that information.
Yeah, thank you.
In addition, this year, there are some proposed projects that have not yet been added to the financial plan, and council will be receiving reports later in the next 2 days with regards to these projects. They are the Spring Park washrooms, bus shelter additions in future years, off-leash dog park, and the hands-free water fountains and bottle filling stations. Those reports will be coming later in the meetings over the next couple of days and have not yet been added to the budget until we receive council direction. Now on to the operations of the wastewater facility. The wastewater facility is operated on a cost recovery basis. Revenue in 2021 was impacted by the continued closure of the Harrison Hot Springs pool during the pandemic. 2022 revenue may continue to be impacted until the pool fully reopens. Expenses will continue to be monitored closely during 2022 for less revenue sources. Under the capital side, the proposed projects for this year are upgrades to the lift station 1, lift station 4, 5, and 6, centrifuge replacement, resurfacing of the membrane tanks, and permit pump replacements. These will either be DCC or reserve funded for the amount shown on screens. Yes, Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, we got the upgrades to be funded by the DCCs, but we've already allocated that 600,000 should we get the drainage down Hot Springs Road. And I think I'm correct in saying last time we only had about 600,000 in the DCCs for the wastewater and the stormwater. So I'm a bit confused that on one hand, we've actually already agreed to put that money aside should we get the drainage down Hot Springs Road. And then we're going to get another 600,000 and that for the lift station 1 upgrade. Someone could explain that to me, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hooper. The
Can you hear me? Well, these are closer to you than me. Come forward, John. Or closer to the speaker, might be of help. You can hear me, you should be able to hear our financial officer or Councillor Hooper. Try it there. Can you hear now?
Yep. Thank you, Your Worship. For Councillor Hooper, drainage DCC liability, drainage DCCs, they have $965,000 in that fund. That is separate from sewer DCCs, which has over 1.7 million in the sewer DCCs. So the funding of 600,000 for drainage would come from that drainage DCC, and the separate sewer DCC would be for anything under the sewer expenditures that are referring to DCC.
Thank you.
As far as the water utility is also operated on a cost recovery basis. User fee revenue will increase as new developments connect to the system. Expenses will be monitored closely to ensure budget is met and any impact caused by the pandemic on revenue is addressed. We did not see that impact in 2021. So expenditures were within budget and so was revenue. Capital expenditures proposed for 2022, $545,000 for an expansion to the water south and St. Alice to Cedar to Lillooet, DCC funded, $125,000. Membrane replacement at the water treatment plant, reserve funded for $220,000. Gensets, reserve funded for $100,000. And the water reservoir reseal and paint the interior tank at $100,000. With regards to reserve, there are budgeted reserve contributions included in the budget. General infrastructure contributions total $375,000. Office equipment, including $4,000 for website upgrading in the future, is $14,000. Building and structures for $15,000. Gas tax will have $122,500 go into its reserve. Fire department equipment, $45,000. It will also get an additional $26,800 from its 2021 operating surplus, and public works equipment will be reserve will have $30,000 added to it for a total general reserve contribution of $628,300. Wastewater reserves will have $232,000 added to them, and water reserves $261,797. Budgeted transfer from reserves to pay for the expenditures this year and proposed in the budget. From general funding will be $417,500, wastewater $1,010,000, and from water $420,000. Development cost charges, 2021 year-end balances. Parks DCCs have $548,000 in them. Drainage DCCs just over $965,000. Sewer DCCs $1,742,000. Water DCCs just over $1,513,000 are the balances in those accounts at the end of 2021. Budgeted transfers out in 22 are Parks DCCs of $20,000, Drainage DCCs $553,400, Sewer DCCs at $600,000, and Water DCCs at $125,000. Are there any questions with regards to expenses or anything before I move on to information on tax rates for this year from any member of council?
Yeah, just one question. Could we get a copy of these slides?
Okay.
If that be possible?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the municipal tax requirements for 2022. As mentioned earlier, the amount required for municipal taxes this year will be $2,519,662. That's an increase over the 2021 amount by $94,534. What this breaks down to is a net tax from non-market change will be 38,357 or 1.58%. Non-market change is a combination of things. It is growth in our assessment. And in addition, this year, it's also the net impact of a change in an appeal for a large property within the village under the business classification. So that's why there is I refer to it as a net change in non-market. Normally it would be growth, but we've had a reduction due to a large appeal in a business class property. The tax increase.
Finance Officer, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Financial Officer. At net tax from non-market change, you indicated the possibility of property assessment appeals from large properties. Is that correct? That amount, 38,000, would that reflect that?
Our experience has been that we have seen appeals that there's a normal appeal process that happens when any property receives their tax notice in early January. And there's a normal process that goes on there, the first level of appeal. And we see those numbers if anybody is successful in their appeal. Usually we see very small changes at that time, and we receive a revised roll before we run the actual tax notices. The more significant impact for the village, and it's seen in many communities and was just recently an article was published about this, was municipalities are seeing more and more where appeals are occurring much later, in a later stage after the tax rolls are run and generated, which result in large refunds having to be made to properties. The village has experienced this in prior years. It's hard to predict or plan for. And what we've seen in the last few years is significant reduction in assessed value for a large property in the business class in the village that has had impacts financially much later after the fact. The most recent one was the success of an appeal that came from both 2020 and 2021, which we just received notice of, which resulted in, from the municipal standpoint, refunding, I think, approximately $6,000 a year after we've already calculated and sent out the tax notices.
Thank you.
So the slide moved on by itself. So we received the completed roll, and the total assessed value of properties for the village now is just short of $950 million. The non-market change, which were, as I mentioned, was the growth and appeals, was approximately $19 million in value there. So that was a net increase to the village. It was roughly 21 million in increases in residential properties coming online with the village, and about 2 million roughly in decrease in the business sector. Overall change to the assessments compared to the previous year was $223 million. So our assessment value last year was about 725 million, and it's now at 949 million. It's an increase of just over 30% compared to 2021. The overall category change in the residential class 1, 30.97% was marked due to market change, 9.44% increase in the business class, and recreational increase was 15.79% on average. So we have our estimated tax rate for 2022 based on our requirement of needing just over 2.5 million in taxes, and having adjusted the new assessments based on the multiplier ratios that council approved last year. So if council wished to have status quo on the ratios, the business ratio is 3.18. The recreation / nonprofit class 8 category is 4.17. And if we use those multipliers, what it would do was give us a residential rate of $2.10 per $1,000 of assessed value. The business rate would be $6.70 per $1,000, and the recreational nonprofit rate would be $8.79 based on those ratios. So if we took an example of the impact on a municipal property, if the property was worth $600,000 in 2021 and had the average assessed value increase of 30.97, it would now be worth $785,000 in 2022. The impact of our change in assessment rate would result in an annual increase on the municipal portion of the taxes only of $132.51 in this example, an approximate 8.69% increase in taxes. For the same value of property, a $600,000 property that was in the business class with average of 9.44% increase would now have a $656,000 assessed value, resulting in a drop of $444.63 in business taxes for the municipal portion compared to last year, and about a 19.7% drop in 9.17% drop in taxes. Again, for the recreational class 8 properties, $600,000 property with a 15.79% average increase for that classification would now be worth $694,740 and result in a $248 annual decrease in their taxes and that would be about 3.9%. This example is using the current status quo ratios that council approved last year. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, one other example I'd like to provide for council today. And this would be if council chose to change the ratios. So in this example, I've used 3.79 as the business ratio and a multiplier. And for the recreation nonprofit class, used 4.7. This would result in a $2 per $1,000 of assessed value for residential, 7.58 for business, and 9.4 for recreational. In this example, and it's just an example for council's purposes, what this would do would change this example on the $600,000 property with the same average increases that each class is experiencing. This change in ratio to these numbers would result in an annual increase to a residential property of $42.88 or 2.81% increase. The business class, $134.96 and a 2.78% increase, and an increase of $180.65 for recreational for a 2.84% increase. The goal of this example was to show council some changes in ratios in order for the percent increase to be relatively even through each class compared to its previous year. So this is just an example of what changing ratios can do. Any questions at this point? And so what we're looking for today, what I'm looking for today is some direction from council with regards to the multipliers, whether they wish to stay at status quo or whether they would want to look to change them.
We'll start with Councillor Piper. You have any comments on the ratios?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you. Just looking back on this last year and the struggles that everybody's going through, I think trying to level the field a bit may be more reasonable. One area that didn't suffer as deeply as others is, I believe, recreational areas. I mean, everybody was trying to get away, and those recreational spots were definitely taken up on their limited availability. So I do have a couple other questions. I didn't want to interrupt during the process, but two questions, and we may not have this answer, but with the boat launch contract, is that coming up on renewal, or do we have several years ahead of us? Do we know the answer to that?
Tracy?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Piper. I'm not sure exactly what the ending contract is. I'm not sure if the corporate officer recalls on that one.
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, we're currently in discussions with the regional district to continue that service.
I'm wondering, perhaps it's obviously outside the budget discussion, but if there's other options available to us, I'd like to have further discussions on that. My second, thank you very much for that out of left field question. My other question is, do we have an idea of the number of homes or the percentages of homes that are still not connected to municipal water because it doesn't run down the front of their property yet?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Pipe and the rest of council. The last time I checked, and this would be a very rough idea, I think it was around 100.
Okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer?
Thank you. Can you hear me? I had the opportunity to go through to listen to the presentation. I've had some challenges, I want to just say at my end. The presentation was flashing, so I sat here attempting to take notes of everything that was said. I have so many questions, but I think really, if I had the opportunity to look at the presentation again, in a way, I wish it had been forwarded to us. Some of the most important numbers to some extent are there. It's very hard to just see them, or as I looked at, couldn't see them. It would have been helpful maybe to have that in the package so that I could have looked at it and understood the numbers better than just kind of seeing this kind of a presentation. A couple questions I have. The COVID funds, there was a sheet on the COVID funds. Unfortunately, I can't access it because it's there and it's gone now. But does that represent, I know that we had a set amount of COVID funds, and I understood they had to be used by the end of 2022. And I know that last year, I think there was one item that had come up and council had decided not to use not to expend the balance of the COVID funds with it. Does the amount showing for the COVID funds now, does that exhaust the allocated funds that initially came from the provincial government? Is that all of them, or is there a balance left? That would be my first question.
Bruce?
Yes, I'm just moving forward. So this is the COVID grant slide. So the 149,300 that is in the budget is for those items below. The two proposed items, which is approximately $50,000, They added to this amount would exhaust all the funding by the end of 2022.
And is it my recollection correct that the funding must be exhausted by the end of 2022 in its present state?
That's correct. We haven't had any information to say it's extended past 2022.
And the 50,000, if added to 149,300, that consumes the balance, doesn't go over the balance. It just basically finishes off that account in full. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's just under $200,000.
Thank you. Okay, that was the one question. The question about the allocations, certainly 2 years ago, when we were confronted by the impact on businesses that would have happened had we simply gone with whatever the assessments reflected the market increases on businesses, and we looked at businesses having what we thought was a unfair, huge increase because of this market valuation at that time on the assessments. We had rejigged the allocations at that time, basically to create only, much more reasonable tax increases for business, and it did result in residences paying a bit more in order to establish that. And then, of course, last year, I believe we went back to the normal formula because the aberration of the huge increase in building values had gone up. And then this year, of course, we've got the opposite, where residential has gone crazy and businesses have not. And I see that if we don't reallocate out the multipliers, businesses will have a decrease, and the increase for residences would be greater. So certainly I would be in favor of kind of following the precedent we established 2 years ago to, at least for a year, leave the standard multiplier, so that businesses, businesses would in fact pay a little higher than they would, but still would be paying a reasonable increase, just like residential. So I think it's something we did 2 years ago to help businesses, and this year it seems reasonable to do that. So I guess in terms of the issue of getting a consensus, I do support rejigging the numbers for this year. I don't want it to be long term, but I support it for this year, to help deal with the inequality of the huge increase in residential values, which is for most of our residents totally artificial, right? So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, just a quick question. We're not voting today or on the changing of the multiplier, are we?
Basically, what this would do is, if I got direction from council today, then I could come forward. When we go to do the tax rate, we would need it for the tax rate. So you'd actually vote on it at the tax rate time, when you do the tax rate bylaw. But getting direction today is what I would use for those calculations. Before I could do the calculations for the split, I would need those rates.
Yeah, because this is the first time we've actually seen this. We've had no time to actually go through it, work out what it's going to affect it's going to have on businesses or anything. So it's a bit sort of thrown into the lines then on this one. No, as long as we're not voting on it today.
No, it's not about voting on it. There is that would come at the time the bylaw is prepared, but in order to prepare the bylaw, I would need to know what council's direction was prior to that.
Mario, thank you.
Councillor Vidal. Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Financial Officer. The increase in bylaw enforcement during last summer, was it substantial amount or in line with previous years?
Last year, after the budget was prepared, there was an RFP that went out for the bylaw, and the proposal we received back, that council accepted at that time, was significantly higher than the previous proponent, who had retired from doing that.
All right, thank you. And out to staff, do we have an expectation when we will receive the annual report from bylaws?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. We will be presenting that to council at the next meeting.
Good, thank you. Regarding the multiplier rate, I agree with Councilor Piper that I think we should look at kind of balancing it out a little bit. I know that most residents have received quite a substantial assessment. And I think that if you could yeah, that's the right slide. Thank you. Or showing like an average increase in previous years multiplier on residential showed an increase of, I believe, 132. 132.
In this, the first example, this was if council kept status quo with with the multipliers they selected last year.
Yeah.
This is what the increase to an average home of $600,000 home. That's what their increase is estimated to be in this example, with the current multipliers being used of 3.18 for business and 4.17 for recreation.
Yep.
And then if we change to 3.79 and 4.70, which they were only selected in order to produce the closest result I could get to show council an example of what would, if council wanted a more even increase to each person, this is what it would take to do it.
Okay. I'm actually in favor for this year, evening it out a little bit. Past years, we have been fortunate to be able to support our businesses. And I think, yeah, I'll support a more even distribution of it, and thank you.
Councillor Hooper?
Yes, on the bylaw enforcement part, we got budgeted 86,700 and we got unaudited 106,000. How much is that including the 25,000 we got for the RCMP to take place?
Yes, it is. It's including the summer policing for the RCMP, which was being funded by COVID-19 Restart Grant and only goes to the end of 2022. That funding, so council, should they wish to continue after that, would have to make a decision at that time, because it wouldn't have the COVID grant funding for it.
Thank you.
Any other councillor? Councillor Palmer?
And just a fast question. Early on in the presentation, there was mention of revenue, and one of the revenue items was an increase, expected increase in parking revenue, I believe, to 310. Okay, could you just address that? Why we would expect that, or is there something that was mentioned that I missed?
We increased the budget from what was 280 to 310,000. This year, we received 361,000 in revenue. However, it was a very hot year. And so we were a little more conservative at the 310 because it only takes a couple of weeks of rain for the revenue to drop off immediately from pay parking.
And the 361 that we received, that is totally net. That's after all of the parking costs that we pay to third parties is taken care of. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. That is just the revenue brought in. It's the actual expenses for that, I think, are about $60,000 approximately. So the net would be around the $300,000 mark.
And based on 310 for next year, though, we would anticipate the net would be about 250. Is that what we
That would-
anticipate?
Yes. That would be about correct.
So it's a very sizable part of our revenue. Okay.
Yes, it's significant. It's probably, if you were looking to raise that in taxation, you'd have to increase taxes 10% because $25,000 is roughly a 1% tax increase.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other councillors wish to ask further questions to the financial officer? First of all, I want to thank the financial officer for the report. It's always a juggle when you're playing with numbers, and it's not easy at times, but I think I would agree that the way the world is today, it's upside down, and businesses have been struggling very hard everywhere to try and maintain their doors open and to try and serve the public. And we in Harrison, as we know or should know, we are a resort community. We totally rely on visitations, and obviously we only have one industry here, which is resort community, and we totally rely on our businesses to keep their doors open because they pay a good chunk of the taxes. So I would be in favor of the alternative of the 2.8, 2.7, and 2.84 that the financial officer showed us as another example on how to deal with this year's taxes. That would also help our residential community. I think last year was around about $20 difference. This year it's probably $22 more difference. So I think that would be helpful as well to a lot of those folks who obviously they're struggling as well in the residential community, especially with the seniors who are on fixed incomes. I think this is a good example. I liked it when I saw it. And then we try and even things out, and we see how we manage, how we go through this year, and then we'll be looking at this obviously again next year, how to deal with the finances of the village. But overall, as we've been shown this morning, from my perspective, I can only go what I see on the screen here, that the village overall is in very good standing, and we have to thank our staff for this, and of course councils on how they've managed the purse in the village. But overall, it's obviously like we've been very fortunate to have the RMI, the hotel tax, as I still like to call it, and the other fundings that we receive, like the gas tax, and of course with the COVID recovery money that we also got, which is tremendous help to the village to move forward, and it helped us with the summer policing as well that we put in place last year. So overall, I'm very happy with what I've seen. And if there's no further questions from council, just for direction for our financial officer, this of course has to come back. Councillor Piper. Councillor Piper, you hear me?
Hi, just waiting for my unmute to take place. Thank you, Worship. Just a quick note, and you reminded me of a point that I raised in years past. I'm hoping that perhaps I'll leave the timing up to staff, but if for those seniors in our community that are experiencing financial hardship and finding it difficult or a challenge this year to pay their property taxes. If staff could share the options available for seniors in that position. I believe the province still has a tax deferment program available. So it would be great to share that out just to alleviate some stresses that some of our seniors may be facing right now.
Tracy, you have any comments on that?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Piper and the rest of council. We can include a little leaflet flyer in with the property tax notice. I believe we did so last year, but we can do that to remind people. There is also the one for families, people with families who also may be struggling. I believe the province still have that option too.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? So we just need a motion for direction for the financial officer. We just need a mover. We don't need a seconder. It's a committee of the whole. It's I'm going with the option first with the status quo option. Those need a mover first, moved by Councillor Hooper. I call any discussion on the status quo, which was last year's. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Palmer, can you hear me?
I can.
I'm assuming you didn't put your hand up, so you're in favor?
I wasn't, your worship, I wasn't clear on what the vote was, so I wasn't going to vote when I wasn't clear.
The vote was either keep the tax rate scenarios at the status quo of last year's, or go to the alternative option that the financial officer showed us, equaling out the tax ratios for the three residential, business, and recreation.
So the first one being the one that would result in business having a decrease and residential having more of an increase.
Yeah.
I just wasn't, I wasn't clear on that. Okay, thank you. I'm prepared to vote now.
So I'll call the vote again, as you didn't come through to you. It's moved by Councillor Hooper for the status quo, which was last year's ratios. All in favor? Opposed? Opposed. So the motion fails. And now do we have a mover for the alternative option of the 2.8, 2.79, 2.84, moved by Councillor Piper? Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion passes.
Did you ask if anyone was opposed? Is anyone opposed to that motion? I need, you called the question, all in favor, and you didn't ask if there was anyone opposed.
Apologies, all opposed. Councillor Hooper. Thank you, Corporate Officer. My apologies. Anything else, Tracy? That gives you some direction?
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Your Worship. And
Just as a quick, before we close this, Tracy, so this will follow with a bylaw for first reading and then a public open house?
Yes, after the rest of the meeting and the reports that are coming towards to council later today with those any decisions from there, we'll be updating the budget, and I will be bringing the budget bylaw forward to council at the next council meeting for the approval of council. It'll come forward at first reading for the approval and to move forward to the public open house.
Thank you. So, Corporate Officer, I'm just going to call a short recess for a washroom break.
Certainly, Your
And then we'll
Worship.
move on.
Thank you.
Thank you. continue with the meeting, and next order of business, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we'll move on to the next item for discussion, and that is a briefing note provided to council. This is addressed to the Letchmont C2C Farm. This briefing note is regarding a flood mitigation project for Harrison Hot Springs priorities. And this is here for council's information, but I believe Councillor Piper is a member of the subcommittee and she may wish to speak to this matter.
Councillor Piper.
Sure, I can say a couple things. First, I just want to thank Your Worship for allowing me to participate on the work group. I mean, it was a room full of very passionate people and wanting to work at record speed in order to get this done. So thank you, and my appreciation back to the group. Council will recall that a recommendation came forward at the Letchmont community to community meeting that we were all at, that all member communities identify their flood mitigation priorities, which are to be included in a letter that goes to the federal government. So the idea is to draw attention to each of the community's priorities and really put a spotlight on this end of the valley. So at this point, the items that were identified in the briefing note from the CAO are costed out in draft form as we wait for that final report from NHC. And you'll also recall that last February, I believe it was, NHC was awarded the contract to prepare a flood assessment review of the Harrison Waterfront, which again is being funded by Provincial Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. In speaking with our CAO, we as council can expect to receive that report in future weeks. But in the meantime, NHC provided preliminary info to the CAO, resulting in what I mentioned is included here in the briefing note. I understand that this information is information only and is intended to bring our emergent issues here in Harrison to the forefront, and in the hope of receiving future flood protection grants or transfers. And I truly believe with wholeheartedly that we, through the C2C, collectively showcasing how works in each of our communities can be linked together is going to benefit us all. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and we are under a tight timeline. So in order to reach the federal timing. So I hope the information included is supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just want to bring something to your attention that I had a call yesterday with Minister Osborne and Minister Farnworth. They just had an urgent meeting with the mayors from Abbotsford to Hope in regards to the past flooding. And I did mention that the C2C would be forwarding them correspondence through. So this should go to you mentioned federal, but should be provincial as well, because Farnworth will be releasing information shortly in regards to the $5 billion that the federal government's bringing forward for the flood protection. And of course, I mentioned, like you said, our dike and our road to the wastewater treatment plant, and like the finance officer said earlier on this morning, our operations manager said that the folks were out yesterday doing an assessment on that. So they'll be waiting for a report from the C2C, and Mayor Horn from Mission. Obviously, we're making an impression on communities now with our unique C2C group. And Mayor Horn now is trying to follow in our footsteps by getting together with their First Nations to form a similar type of committee. So we can pat ourselves on the backs of District of Kent, our 5 First Nations, and of course Harrison for being on this since 2012 when Harrison joined on. So we look forward to the report from the committee, and that's it. Nothing else? Councillor Vital.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to either Councillor Piper or to our infrastructure manager, I see 4 priorities that are noted in the briefing report, and I'm wondering if there is, of those 4, is there any higher priority, or do we feel that they're kind of all on the same urgency? Thank you.
Councillor Piper.
I'll pass it over to staff, but in order to be equal amongst all of the communities, we were asked to put forth 4 priorities. So I'll turn it over to staff to explain how those priorities were captured. But I think these, in my personal opinion, cover the requirements for the village quite nicely.
Yeah. Councillor Vital, is that it?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Piper.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper.
Yes, thank you. I beg your pardon for gloating on this, but we've got the access road to the sewer wastewater station. Now, we've applied for 2 grants for that in the past, and each grant we've said to raise it up by 100 millimeters. And I said we shouldn't be dealing in like 4 inches, we should be dealing in feet. It's nice to be bared out with this when they're saying to raise it 4 foot on 1.5 meters. The problem is if we don't get all of these in one hit, you can raise the roadway to the access station, but you can get the rest of the village flooded. You're still not going to get up to there. On the upgrade of the Harrison Dyke to the lake, what area are we talking about? Is it just round the lagoon, or is it the walkway along?
The dike is the dike from Rendell Park to the floodgates.
Right, so they've got to raise that by a meter. Now, I've been looking at other ways and drawings of how this has been done in the past. To raise that by a meter, you're going to affect the views from the businesses, the restaurants down there, because they now won't be able to see the lake at all. There are other ways of doing this. It's quite simple. And we got the false main. Yes, I'm all agreed that we should be getting rid of that, putting it up above. But the main priority I see is getting the floodplain mapping done first, so we know where the problems are going to lie. I mean, I remember seeing some figures produced by, I forget who it was now, but Rendell Park has got a low spot in it. Now, if we're not addressing Rendell Park as well, water's just going to come around the corner. So we really need to get the floodplain mapping done first on what areas are going to be affected by this before we start asking for 9.4 million. It's somewhere along the line, if we don't get all this in one go, it's pointless, because water's just going to find its way around whatever we do. So get the floodplain mapping done first, and then let's see where we can spend this other money. And again, if we're raising the dike area, that means we're going to be flooding the lagoon. The lagoon's going to be flooded all the time. And as I've said before, its point is doing any work on the lagoon until we've got this floodplain flooding sorted out. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I think in a perfect world, you may be right in some of your comments, but it's not a perfect world. The provincial and federal governments don't always work that way. When they put out a funding like this $5 billion that's coming through, you have to jump on quick to see what you can. I finish speaking, please?
Yeah.
Finish quick. And also you heard earlier on from our operations manager that would you like to repeat? The hydraulic group was out yesterday. Mr. Cook?
Yes, Your Worship. As mentioned before, I did discuss the berm project that is coming up with the consultant. And I did pass them on all of the technical information as it went out for tender yesterday. And I forwarded all the documentation that we have from our consultant to them to incorporate in their study.
And in regards to the 1 meter, I mean, this goes back to way back to when Mr. Allen was on council. We were all on council. We all knew that that dike was built way back several years ago. It was built after the 48 flood, and then it was redone again in the 80s with that brick that's going along there with the Canada Works program, I believe, at the time. That's why we purchased the aqua dams in case we did get any flooding. But the whole idea is from Rockwell Drive all along to the where the floodgates are. So that's the reason for, yes, we all appreciate another meter blocks the views, but most quite, well, I suppose you could say at least 3 or 4 of our restaurants do have patios, which wouldn't affect the view at all. But now it is affected now to a certain degree, but it would affect it more. But of course, that's up for discussion at a later date. All we're trying to do here is to mitigate what we've heard, what I heard yesterday from the provincial government in regards to I mean, they made that urgent call for a reason, because there's a lot of worries and fears out there, and we got the fresh net to come this year as well. We don't know how that's going to affect our areas. So this funding, as you know, when they come out with whatever funding it may be, they don't give us a lot of time to make an application to get it in. But the previous once or twice that we didn't get the grant for that road was due to that we didn't have a proper plan in place, which we're doing now. And we learned this with the water plant when we put a water plan in place, $65,000 at the time that we got the grant the following year, when we had that all that information in place for the provincial government and federal government. So they love to see the plans first before they sign the checks. So we'll wait to see what happens. Let's get the reports coming in from the hydraulic people when they come in, and we'll just follow when this funding comes forward. We've applied for the 2 million for the Hot Springs Road, and we'll see what happens with the other funding for the other areas of concern, like the other municipalities are doing. Thank you. First, it was Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I understand that this memo needs to be sent by tomorrow. That's my understanding. So I just want to indicate I'm happy with it. It's, you know, there's always issues. I understand in a perfect world, all of those things and even more. And I understand there's going to be effects, there's trade-offs in everything, and they can be dealt with at a later point. But obviously, I think there's 2 things that come to my mind. Number one is obviously the memo has to go forward. We don't know what's going to come of it. It's, senior governments have a lot of control and many financial issues, and I just hope for the best, but we have to move forward. But then secondly, I think we have to really advocate and keep this on our radar as a top village issue, because obviously we now know that the weather, well, we've known for a while, but we've denied it a lot, that the weather patterns have changed. And, I don't think that if nothing happens, we're going to have a flood next week or next year or the following year. I mean, we've just gone through a historic November, and the flooding in Harrison was not major compared to other communities. Mind you, if it was your basement that flooded, I'm sure it was a major flood, but nonetheless, it's something we have to deal with. We have to look at it. So I think making this a #1 priority for the village is very important. I like that. I like what would come forward. We could argue whether one is more important than the other. We need all four, but if we don't get the thing out by tomorrow, it's not going to matter anyway. So I think it's important to do that. I think we should be bringing this for discussion several times to see what we can do and how we can advocate. And in terms of increased dike, I recognize that an increased dike could block some views. On the other hand, the increased dike could be done and landscaped in a way that it is very attractive. It might provide us with some possibilities, and obviously it may well be that you lose a bit of view, but you have the security of not having your unit flooded or your business flooded. So that's kind of the trade-off. So anyway, I just wanted to say I'm supportive. I don't know what we were needing to do if this is our opportunity to input or correct, or whether or not we need to make a motion that we forward it. But I think whatever we need to do to move this forward so it can go out needs to be done. That's my view. Thank you.
Councillor Hooper.
Yes, thank you. Through you to staff. The flood pumps, what height would the lake have to reach before the flood pumps become ineffective?
Mr. Cook.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, at what height would the lake have to reach for the flood pumps to become ineffective?
That's a good question. I don't know the actual elevation. The flood pumps would be still trying to empty the Miami River basin if the waters were pushing the floodgates closed. The only way it would be, it wouldn't work, obviously, is if it reached the dike and was filling the river itself.
Yeah, thank you. Because as I said, if we raise the access road to the wastewater station by 4 feet, we also have to consider the drainage coming down from the mountain on that and the source. I mean, in our last proposal that was sent to them, we was going to remove trees and then replant them. Well, looking at everything I've got in front of me, you shouldn't be planting trees on the protection area. It's got to be 2 meters away from it. No, and as for say we can raise that by 4 feet, but we've also got to raise the area around the flood pump by 4 feet, haven't we? The whole lot. So, but we've got the hotel. I mean, this 400 meters, is that just from the flood pump to the right? So the other areas, say if they get flooded, we still can't get there. Also, with these atmospheric pressures, rivers we get in night, we would have to consider the debris slide from the mountain there as well. I'm sorry for all the questions, but I'm trying to be proactive rather than reactive, because it's best to get it done before than mess about afterwards. But no, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Some good points. And also I'd just like to reiterate discussions that I've had as a mayor going back to George Ferguson, Clint Hames, the federal government, provincial government regarding sediment removal on the Fraser River and the cause of flooding. And I also reiterated this with our local ministers just after the terrible flooding, that if you'd listened to us 20 years ago, maybe this may not have happened. especially in the areas of where it did happen. But you see, we don't have a crystal ball, councillor. We do the best you can. We're a small community. I think we have been very proactive over the years in trying to protect our community, considering what happened in 48 and I think 1884, whatever it was, 89, previous to that. So I think we've, overall, like Councillor Palmer said, we've been very fortunate in Harrison. This latest terrible incidents that happened in November, that we were surrounded by disaster, and we were really, except for some few areas that, like I said, if you're below the floodplain in the old homes and you don't have a flood pump, sump pump, then you're in trouble. So we'll address everything as it comes along. We'll say we're getting the engineering done at the moment, and then when that comes forward, it's another discussion point. But thanks very much for your comments, and I'd like to move on. I think this is just one more comment.
Yeah, just one more comment. I mean, we've got our plan or the memo that's going off already done. But are we going to do a coordinated plan with Kent, Seabird Island and the rest of it to prevent flooding coming into the village overland? Thank you.
Councillor Piper, would I be correct in saying that each community has 4 areas to discuss, and each community above that is putting in their own concerns? Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship. And in the meeting, I stressed that the importance of how projects, say in Harrison, would tie in to works in Kent and Seabird and Stalis and staff, once they receive all of the community's priorities by tomorrow, are going to attempt to link those together. And so to go back and thank you, I raised my hand to speak to those points of the years and years of advocacy work that has occurred with councils to higher levels of government, stressing, don't forget about us at this end of the valley. I think this is this latest effort is going to be extremely valuable. And I think with more voices being expressed through this letter going to the provincial and federal governments will stress the importance, and that we're not going to be overlooked. We are as important as further west.
Thank you, Councillor. This is just here for receipt, Corporate Officer?
That's correct.
You
No
don't need
motion required.
Okay, this is just here for receipt, folks, for your information. So next order of business. Any other questions from council on this? No? Moving on. Next order of business, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the report from the operations manager regarding water filling stations and water fountains.
Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Your Worship. Up for discussion is the installation of water fountains in Rendell Park, Spring Park, and the beach washrooms. Council previously approved up to $10,000 from the gas tax funds for the purchase of a water bottle filling station for beach washrooms and or Rendell Park. Since then, the COVID-19 restart funding has been made available, which could be used for these improvements instead of gas tax, which will enable the village to install hands-free units in up to 3 locations within the village. Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, concerns have been raised about transmission of bacteria and viruses through common touch points. COVID-19 has been shown to remain active on some surfaces, which poses potential health sanitary risks associated with commonly touched surfaces, such as hand-operated water bottle filling stations. Drinking water bottle filling stations and fountains serve an important function, providing free access to safe municipal water, offering an alternative to bottled water or sugary drinks, and accommodation of a wide array of, and it does accommodate a wide array of users, including both residents and visitors. Staff recommend installing foot-activated water bottle filling stations for Rental Park and Spring Park and replacing the existing water fountain at the beach washrooms with a fountain that incorporates a water bottle filling station. As you can see from the cost estimates, Rental Park and Spring Park respectively are $16,000 and $22,000. And the beach washroom replacement or fountain replacement would be estimated at $7,000 with a total construction cost for the project at approximately $45,000. Recommendation that the installation of the water bottle filling station water fountains at Rental Park, Spring Park, and the beach washrooms be approved at a cost of up to $45,000 to be funded by the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant funding.
Mr. Cook, so we have a recommendation. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Vidal. For discussion, we'll start with Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Cook, the beach washroom project or potential project, would it would also be foot activated, not hand activated, correct?
No, unfortunately, there isn't an option for this type of water bottle filling station. It will still be push button activated.
So what you're not aware of any alternative that would provide for foot activated at the beach washrooms?
During my research, I wasn't able to find an option. If I may be able to contact the supplier to see if there is a foot activated option. It would just be a simple button that would be pushed by the foot and a small electric connection. So I don't anticipate that would increase the value by very much.
Okay, I do think that the beach washroom filling station was probably the one that would be utilized the most. So I would appreciate it if a little bit more research could be done to see if the possibility of foot activated one there also. Thank you.
And Councillor Hooper.
Yes, thank you. The only thing I've got against these water filling stations is there any station where the neck of your bottle will not touch, or you will not be able to touch the nozzle where the water coming out? I say this because when you're in the pub now, you have to have a clean glass every time you go up because they don't want contamination from you reaching that nozzle. So on a health and safety point, on contamination and passing on, especially this COVID day and age, is there any filling stations where you can physically not touch the nozzle with your bottle? Thank you.
Cook.
Thank you, Your Worship. You bring up a very good point. There is a possibility that it could be contaminated. The unfortunate part is there isn't anything that could block from what I found anyways, that would block stop someone from touching the bottle against the filler. The only thing that would have to be done is staff would have to, as part of their regular cleaning, would have to wipe down the unit, the common touch points.
Yeah, but that have to be done after every time someone actually used it. I mean, I have seen them in Europe where you stand on the pedal and the water just comes out of a nozzle. You can't actually put your bottle up there or anything. You have to put the bottle down there so the water comes in. That is the sort of thing I'm looking at. But so I'd hate to see sort of anyone pass on an infection and claim they got it from our water filling stations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, I'm wondering about durability. Is there any indication from the manufacturer of the device's durability. I'm thinking about vandalism, of course, with these installs in the parks.
Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, they are actually designed to be vandal resistant.
Excellent. And another question as far as maintenance, do we know the frequency in which filters or working parts would need to be fixed or replaced? I'm just thinking, especially for those high volume locations such as the beach washroom, what that looks like for us down the road.
Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Your Worship. The maintenance, it's a very simple design. It's just push button activated. The only thing that I could see would happen, it would be that could falter would be the electrical system at the beach washrooms. But they're built very sturdy, and it's a very simple design. So maintenance should be very low.
Is there any, sorry if I may, is there any filtration in these devices?
There is an option for filtration, and it just depends on whether you want to include it or not. That obviously would increase our maintenance cost with replacement of the filter and then also the time to do so.
Excellent. Thank you, Worship. I see these installs. I've wanted to see these for quite some time, so I see them actually benefiting once we get back to some form of normal and events come back to the community, and our beaches are filled during the summer, that people having a free access to hydration, very important, especially with sun safety and whatnot. So thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer?
Thank you. I'm supportive of, I always know I'm getting older when I look at the price and the cost of things. And each time I think, no, a fountain can't cost that much money. But I do recognize that things are expensive, and building things to a municipal standard particularly makes things expensive. I'm interested in location. So I understand where the beach one would be. Where would the one, just, has there been a determination of where it would be, for instance, in Rendell Park?
Cook? Thank you, Your Worship. I would anticipate that it would be fairly close to where the washrooms, the current washrooms are. I think it would be an appropriate location.
And the one in Spring Park, where would that be?
That actually hasn't been determined. I think the closer to the activities probably makes the most sense. And tomorrow there's going to be a presentation regarding the washrooms, and if there was if council wished to install washrooms at Spring Park, I would encourage maybe a filling station similar to the one that would be at the beach washrooms on the side of the building, or we could get something incorporated in the same location.
There's already water in Spring Park, so I take it that would probably be close to that existing water line in any event. That would make sense, right? Close to beside the tennis court.
That is correct.
I think it's a good idea. I think that, of course, my house backs onto Spring Park, so I pay attention to Spring Park, and I think Spring Park is a real jewel in the area. And I see more and more residents using it, and I think this will be a significant addition for residents as opposed to just tourists. So I think it's a very good thing. I do recognize it's kind of creates some interesting. Last year there was a homeless person living in the park for numerous days, and the fact that there was a washroom and water there certainly facilitated that. So, and I guess that's a reality of what can happen. But no, I think having the fountain is a very good idea. I'm hoping that we can also determine a couple of other things for Spring Park, but the fountain seems like a good start. So I'm certainly supportive of that, particularly for tennis players who hopefully are working hard enough that they need to rehydrate during their games. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions before I say something from councillors? No? Yeah, first of all, thank you to the staff for bringing this forward. I know it's come before us a year ago or so in regards to water filling station. I personally, myself, I can't find the word how to describe myself. I'm very strong on hygiene, more so in this COVID pandemic era that we all live in. And my concern is, number one, about the fountain part of it, and number two, you know, I mean, somebody collecting the recyclables along the beach could just pick up a bottle and put it under that to fill it up. So I'm really concerned about the sanitization of the whole setup. And then, you know, I mean, we only have so much staff time that's allocated for cleaning the washrooms, and you can't be there even if it was every 10 minutes to say, you haven't got that sort of time. And in locations isolated like it is at night in Rendell Park, they could be, you know, misused. I'm not going to say with what, but you can guess, could be misused. I love the idea. I think it's a great idea. They're nice looking machines. But I'm wondering, after some of the comments I've heard, whether this should go back to our staff to see if there's any other alternatives in the sort of same, or maybe a little bit more price range that would satisfy. The actual hygiene part is really my concern, whether it's the water bottle to fill or whether it's the person leaning over to have a drink. To me, if it wasn't COVID, I wouldn't worry. But I mean, we've all put our heads over a fountain to drink, whether it's been on the beaches or wherever we've been to visit, or even at schools. But when all these things have disappeared, these type of drinking fountains, I'm just wondering, is it coming back as a common thing to other communities, or is it still not something that they're considering? Do you have any comments on that, Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually do have a small excerpt out of a release from the BC CDC and the Ministry of Health. They state that limiting the use of water fountains is no longer recommended. However, they do encourage good hand hygiene prior to use and include clean. They encourage the providers to make it part of your cleaning touch points, as I mentioned before, as part of your routine. You bring up a good point about the part of the fountain where you're drinking from. There is an option where you can put a valve in that can isolate that, so that wouldn't be active. We could turn it off and on as necessary. Like Councillor Piper mentioned, when we get back to normal, we can have it full functional. Now I can work with the supplier to see if there are any options that can guard the filling portion. However, of course, even if there's a guard, there'd still be an option or a possibility of someone touching the guard with their water bottle. But I would imagine that, especially with the fact that we're in the pandemic, there's options that we could look at to separate the bottles from the actual filling spigot.
Thank you. And a question to our financial officer, is this something of urgency that you need today?
Thank you, Your Worship, to you and the rest of council. These are funds that are to be, the COVID-19 grant restart monies are to be used by the end of 2022. So if they weren't going to be used for this project, they would have to be reassigned to something else.
Okay, so I'm not sure how the rest of council feels. Do you want to move ahead with the recommendation, or does the mover like to change this to refer this back to staff for more what's the word? More input and different options and other options? What is council's wishes? I'll go around the table. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Your Worship. While I do appreciate your concerns, and I'm a little bit of a clean bug myself, so I understand where you're coming from, but I think it's long-term planning for me. I think there's a funding option that is currently available that we must consume by the end of this year. So I think I personally recommend or will support the recommendation on the floor, and I'd like to see it move forward.
Thank
Because I
you.
think even once installs are done, those precautions or those amendments to the devices, staff can certainly take care of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. My belief would be to proceed. I would, if we had a vote on it, I would vote to proceed on it. It seems to me some of the concerns about hygiene can be dealt with by staff when they look at the process, like when they're ordering it and installing it. So I'd like to go ahead with it.
Councillor Hooper.
Yes, originally this, when it come to council, this was going to be funded by the RMI. So I see no point in, we might as well put it off, let the RMI fund it and use the restart money to do another project. We do need time to actually investigate other options on water delivery for this. And I say we was going to fund it out the RMI last time. So let's just put it off, use the restart money for another project and take it from there. Thank you.
You, Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do think we need to go ahead with this in anticipation of our upcoming tourist season. And I am satisfied that the concerns that were raised by council could be addressed by Mr. Cook prior to any installation of the devices. So I will vote in favor of it, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. Is it?
Excuse me, Your Worship, I
Can-
believe the finance officer has a comment. Finance officer has a comment.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the rest of council. Just a point of clarification. The water bottle filling stations are not included in the RDS, not funded by RMI. There was one in the budget for rental part to be funded from gas tax.
Thank you for that. Can we add a friendly amendment that Mr. Cook look into the viability of more hygienic measures to be added to the machine? If that's the, you can add whatever words you like to that, Mr. Cook, for the water.
Your Worship, are you suggesting that he research further options within? Can you put your microphone on?
Sorry,
please?
sorry, Mr. Allen. I'm in favour of the machines and the locations, but I would like Mr. Cook, what he said, he could also look into a simple way of maybe trying to address these points to see if, I mean, either if it means and like Councillor Piper said, also a filtration cost as well to that, but that, I'm not going to get into that now, but there might be some options that you can look into. But I'm in favour, but I'm just concerned about the overall, not the cost, or even if we had to add some cost, is that safety to all of us is paramount. That's where I'm coming from in this day and age. So that's Is that possible? You have some direct and look into maybe some equipment changes?
Yes, sir. Just to clarify, these estimates are very reserved. And if we were to add filtration and or foot pedal at the beach washrooms or additional attachments, I say, for lack of a better term, it shouldn't impact. There should be no reason for me to come back to council for more funds.
That's great. That's all I'm asking. So no further discussion on this. On the recommendation, I call the question. We've had a mover. All in favor? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Hooper. Motion passes. Thank you for the information. Thank you, Council, for that. Next order of business, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to the next item for today, and that is a report from the Community Services Manager regarding BC Transit Bus Shelter Program.
Michelle?
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, federal funding has been secured by BC Transit through to the 24-25 fiscal year to help lower the capital cost of new bus stop amenities. This program covers approximately 80% of the capital costs, with the municipal share being 20% of the amenity plus the full cost of site prep, installation, and shipping. There are 11 bus stops throughout the village today. 6 of them remain without shelters. The 5 bus stops that do have shelters have the E2 type, and these type shelters meet the needs of our ridership. And we're continuing to install the E2 type base shelters would result in lower ongoing maintenance costs. BC Transit is requesting that communities that wish to participate in the cost share program submit applications now for current and future years through to 2024. Staff is recommending that the village apply to BC Transit for funding to install these E2 base shelters at the remaining bus stops at a cost of up to $14,000 each, according to the following schedule. So this year, 1 bus stop at Hot Springs Road on 900 block. In 2023, the Hot Springs Road at Aspen Lane and Hot Springs Road at Balsam Avenue. And then in 2024, 3 bus stops, Lowell at Abbott Maple Drive, Eagle Street at Bear Avenue, and Emerald Avenue at Hot Springs Road. Before the shelters are installed at the following 3 locations, staff is recommending that these bus stops be relocated mainly for improved safety reasons. These being the Hot Springs Road 900 block, Hot Springs Road at Balsam Avenue, and the Eagle Street at Bear Avenue. All these relocations are fairly minor and would be moved to street lamps that would help illuminate the location. The process of moving these bus stops does require an application to BC Transit and notification to adjacent property owners. There are 4 recommendations. Your Worship, would you like to address them one at a time, or would you like me to read them all at once?
It's up to you, Your Worship. You can certainly deal with the motions all in one.
Do them one at a time, and then we'll have discussion on each one. So on the first one, a staff be authorized to move bus stops numbers. We need a mover. Moved by Councillor Piper, and then we'll have discussion. We'll start with Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Your Worship. I may sound like a broken record, so my apologies, but transit shelters bring dignity to ridership. And in addition, they provide alternate travel modes as options or as a necessity for residents or those that choose to visit and work in the community. We as a community, in my educated opinion, are deeply privileged to have such a transit service within our community and one that connects to nearby communities. So I do wish we could have all the shelters at all the stops all at once, but to be respectful to budget, I fully understand that. I hold no issue with the relocations. I thank staff for thinking ahead, and illumination is paramount to safety in and around these stops. So I support.
Mr. Palmer.
I'm supportive of this recommendation. No other comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I support the bus stops. The only thing is how many people here have used the transit? I've used it a couple of times, and the drivers will always say, "Where do you want to get off?" They don't always stop at the bus stops. They will drop you off as near to your door as possible. But if we want to install the bus stops, I've got no problem with that. But I say I've used the transport to get down here on a number of occasions, and yeah, the drivers are hats off to the drivers. They will drop you off where you want. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I think they're being very obliging and courteous, but would ask Ms. to obviously discuss this with BC Transit. Am I correct?
So in rural areas, BC Transit does make a provision for people to either flag down a bus to be picked up outside of a regular bus stop or to be dropped off anywhere along the route. But having the bus shelters is really important for people who are waiting at the regular bus stop. And these shelters provide service for, riders of approximately 50 that use the stop in a day. I don't have the exact statistics from BC Transit, but I do know that our ridership is within that limit.
According to the stats, which I've read out on several occasions, I think, from the regional district who run the show with BC Transit, I think our area is way up in the 73% of ridership, believe it or not. So it's people are using it, which is great. Now, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, thank you for bringing forward this initiative. I think any improvements do have the potential to increase ridership, which hopefully is, well, it's one of my goals and advocating with BC Transit perhaps in the future. But I do see the benefit of this, especially during our larger events during the summer and the fall. And thank you for addressing safety issues and ensuring that bus stops are illuminated. So I am 100% in support of this motion, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. So on number one, I'll call the question. We've had a mover. All in favor? Everybody in favor? Nobody opposed? Thank you. Number two, do we have a mover for number two? That is the staff apply to BC Transit Shelter Program. Moved by Councillor Vidal. Discussion, Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, on the shelters, I've got no problem at all, but can we please go with a more enclosed shelter to give those using it, especially first thing in the morning when we got inclement weather, so they're not standing out in the freezing rain or the blowing snow. I think Agassiz's got one where you just go in, there's a glass fascia there, and come out. To offer more protection to those that actually want to use the transit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Vidal.
Nothing further, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Worship. I see great benefit in having consistency with the same style of shelters throughout the community. I have heard from individuals that are in those almost completely enclosed shelters during summer months, and to get some form of shade, and it's a little bit of a greenhouse effect, I'll say, inside. So I prefer and I like the style of the ones that we currently have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer.
I'm fine. Thank you.
So on number 2, I'll call the question. All in favor? Everybody in favor? Nobody opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Number 3, that E-based transit shelters be installed for bus stops. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Piper. We'll start with discussion. Councillor Palmer.
I'm fine with the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Piper.
I'm great, all good, no comments.
Councillor Hooper.
Yes, I'm looking at the one at Eagle Bear Avenue. I mean, we're moving at 280 meters. Now, where it might seem a lot, we're moving it quite a distance. I'd like to see that at least halved, just for those that are using it that have got a disability or that. I mean, coming through the park is a shortcut from those in Miami River that want to use the bus shelter. And then they've got to walk another 280 odd meters. I know it'd be nearer for some people that are got disabilities, but no, I think 280 meters is a bit far to actually move the bus stop. I mean, it's going just the other side of Naismith. There's no. So looking at the drawing, I take it this is going to be on a grass area. The grass area at the side of the property in Naismith. So no, I'd like to see this distance shortened. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Vidal.
Nothing further, Your Worship.
Thank you. So I'll call Councillor Palmer.
Your worship, Councillor Hooper's, I do see some logic to what he said, but I just confuses me because that's the content of motion number 1 that we all voted for, was the moving of the bus stops. And now this is just the installation of the bus stops. So my understanding is that the issue that was just raised is already done with our first motion, unless I'm confused here.
No,
Thank
that
you.
is correct.
That is correct, Councillor. Comments, Councillor? No. I'll call the question on number 3. All in favor? Everybody in favor? Nobody opposed? Motion passes. Last one, number 4, up to 14,022, 28,023, and 42,024 for the installation of bus shelters be included in the 5-year financial plan. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Palmer. Discussion will start with Councillor Palmer.
Again, I'm supportive of it. It's all part of the same plan. So seems to me that it's a good move, and it phases it over a period of time for the costs. So I'm happy with that.
Thank you, Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Worship. I'm fully supportive. And I'll bring this point up at a future meeting, but because it's nothing to do with transit, more school buses, but I will bring up at a future time that perhaps staff and SD 78 put their expertise together and to, figure out locations for our students, which I've never seen as many students waiting on the side of the road for the school bus to pick them up than I have in the last couple of years. So I'll bring that up at another point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So have I covered everybody? Have I left anybody out? Councillor, Councillor Hooper.
Yes, just a question. Is the cost of all this up to us? Is it all coming out of the gas fund, or is BC Transit actually contributing part towards this?
Joe?
This part that's coming out of the gas tax is our 20% portion plus the costs of shipping, installation, and site prep.
That's fine. That suits me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm support of the motion with just one question is through you to community manager I'm just curious as to why we're only starting with one in 2022. And then further up over the next 3 years, is that a budget consideration? Thank you.
Joe? Or the finance officer, whichever one.
Yeah, it's a budget consideration that the gas tax had already been allocated, and in future years, we have a little bit more flexibility. Maybe the finance officer would like to comment on that. But also just the timing of the grant program. With the applications being open now, we only had time to budget for one, and then going forward, we have a little bit more time to plan.
Yes,
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing,
thank you.
nothing further.
No further questions on the last item. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, anybody? Nobody opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Good. And I think we're done, are we not?
Yes, we are for today, Your Worship.
Okay,
Looking for, if there's nothing further, we're looking for an adjournment to tomorrow, Friday, January 28, 2022 at
So
10
the,
o'clock.
so the motion to adjourn is that is to 10 a.m. tomorrow, Friday, to continue. Moved by Councillor Palmer, is it? Thank you. Second, oh, just need a mover, that's all. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Yes.
Everybody for coming to the meeting. Appreciate it. See you tomorrow.
Sure.